Welcome to a very special episode of Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. And as we promised, Senator, as we talked about your dear friend Lindsey Graham and his passing, we said we were going to put out that original episode with the senator that he was the very, very first guest of Verdict, and that is going to be this show.
Well, Lindsey Graham, the Senate lost Lindsey this weekend. The world lost Lindsey this weekend. He was one of a kind. He had an extraordinary life and legacy serving our nation, 23 years in the Senate, 33 years in the Air Force. He made a profound difference, and he was the very first guest on Verdict right when this show launched. And he came in and joined us right when the show was started. It started on the first day of the very first Trump impeachment. This episode is in the middle of the impeachment, and Lindsey came from the Senate floor, leaving about midnight to go to the studio to record. It was a classic and priceless episode. In fact, he starts off by saying, "What is a podcast?" And we actually talked for years about selling T-shirts, Verdict with Ted Cruz, and on the back, "What is a podcast?" Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
He was one of a kind. I am grieving and miss my friend. Every member of the Senate misses Lindsey Graham. And give a listen to this podcast. Watch this podcast to remember why he was such an extraordinary senator and such an extraordinary human being.
Hello, I'm Senator Lindsey Graham. Welcome to Verdict with Ted Cruz, the #1 podcast in the entire country. What is a podcast?
Welcome back to Verdict with Ted Cruz. I'm Michael Knowles. I'm joined by not one, but two U.S. senators to help us break down the most shocking day of the entire impeachment trial. Senator Graham, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Gentlemen, the last time that we sat down, I was told this impeachment was going to drag on for weeks. We were going to get witnesses. We were going to get Bolton. We were going to get Hunter Biden. This was going to get long and ugly. I go to sleep. I wake up today, and the senators are voting. No more witnesses. This thing could be over next week. Senator Cruz, what happened?
Well, today was a big day, and let me say, Lindsey, thank you.
Welcome.
You. I appreciate your coming. This is late at night. We spent all day in the Senate.
They're not spending a lot of money on production here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, you're right. Yesterday, if the vote had gone differently today, this trial could have gone on for months. Mm-hmm. We could have seen it drag on and on and on. And it was a big deal. It was up in the air. And today was the most important vote we've had in the entire trial. It really came down to, we knew we had 47 Democrats that wanted more witnesses. Yeah. Why? Because they hadn't proven the case. They're losing. And so the only hope they have is extend it, go on a fishing expedition, and see if they can find something. The big open question was, were 4 Republicans going to join them? We knew that 2 Republicans were. They'd announced it already. Mitt Romney and Susan Collins were voting with them. There were 2 other senators who were in play, Lamar Alexander, Lisa Murkowski. And it was close. Last night, Lamar announced that he was going to come out and say enough is enough, and we just got a final decision from Lisa today, just a few minutes before she voted.
Absolutely.
So I saw the update on my phone when Senator Murkowski finally decided she was going to vote no more witnesses.
How does that work?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because
Michael, have you ever seen his phone?
Did you get?
Hang in there. That's worth the wait.
You don't
get updates on it.
It is a flip phone.
It is. The Russians can't get in this. You'll all have one in 5 years.
Senator Graham, you are clearly a fiscal conservative if you were using that kind of cell phone. What happened with Senator Murkowski? I know that you two gentlemen were wheeling and dealing a little bit on the Senate floor.
So let's, number one, Ted was awesome. We had a little team trying to convince people. Can you say shit show on a podcast?
I think you just did,
good.
actually.
All right. So what would happen if you call witnesses being a shit show?
Yeah.
You're just not going to call John Bolton. If you're going to call a witness, we're going to call all the witnesses. What do you know? Want to know a little bit about the Bidens? I like Joe Biden, but give me a break. If Mike Pence's son was making $3 million a year from the most corrupt gas company in the Ukraine, don't you think you might hear about it?
Right.
You're only going to hear about the Bidens on his podcast. So the bottom line here is Ted made a very eloquent argument that it throws the courts into chaos. It'd be the first impeachment in history if you have executive privilege will be decided by the United States Senate, that if you call one witness, you're going to call a bunch of witnesses. The president didn't get to call one witness in the House, so you open up Pandora's box. And number two, the whole idea of legitimizing an impeachment in the House that took 78 days. You can't get a parking ticket in 78 days if you contest it. Not one witness allowed to be called by the president. No cross-examination. The bottom line is the whole thing was a sham, and we were trying to convince Lisa and everybody else, don't legitimize this. Don't do their work for them. They're accusing you of being unfair because you did not call a witness they chose not to call. Why didn't they call John Bolton? Because it would be inconvenient. They couldn't impeach the president by Christmas. That's not a good reason to ignore the courts.
Do you think that it was the public arguments, what we all saw on TV, that moved Senator Murkowski, or was it more private conversations?
So I think the pivotal moment happened day before yesterday. Day before yesterday, Adam Schiff made a mistake. He was standing up arguing, and he said, he said, listen, the White House defense team have made John Bolton relevant because they have contradicted what he said. And then he threw a little aside. He said, if they'd have stipulated to it, then they'd have an argument. And it was interesting. I heard that. Jay Sekulo's eyes got real wide when he said that. And I got up and went back to the cloakroom. Lindsey went back to the cloakroom.
Well, I opened my eyes at that point.
So for those of us who are not U.S. senators, why is that the big light bulb moment?
So, well, I'll tell you. I immediately, in the cloakroom, got my phone, texted my team, and said, give me the transcript of exactly what Schiff just said.
Yeah.
And I went to Lindsey, and we began talking, saying, look, we need to get Lamar. We need to get Lisa. This idea of if you stipulate to a quid pro quo, if you agree, even if there is a quid pro quo, we win, that might get their vote. That might give them a ground to be comfortable. So we got the script. Lindsey and I together in the cloakroom, we talked with Lamar. We showed him exactly what he said. We said, what do you think about this? We talked with Lisa.
Right.
We said, hey, what do you think about this? They were open to the idea. They weren't convinced, but they were thinking about it. They were listening. We kept talking. The next day in the question period, I think the most important question is a question Lindsey wrote that I helped him write. And it was a question that was to the White House team that essentially said, if you assume for sake of argument that John Bolton testifies and everything he says is right, that we just assume everything's right, that there's a quid pro quo, is that an impeachable offense or not? And the White House lawyers, they didn't want to go down this road. They had to be dragged, kicking and screaming to this point. And I'll tell you, there was some kicking and screaming that Lindsey and I were both engaged with.
Yeah.
But they got up and they gave the answer, the most important answer, where they said, look, even if he testified, even if he says it's a quid pro quo, it doesn't change that it's an impeachable offense, which means his testimony isn't necessary. And they walked through, as we've been talking about on this podcast, that a president can always investigate corruption. And if that's right, that a president can always investigate corruption, there was more than enough evidence of corruption. And I think that played that exchange where the White House lawyers made that argument in response to the question we teed up, I think was pivotal to getting both Lisa and Lamar, especially Lisa, to yes, which we needed.
So what you're saying is the White House team was pushing back. They didn't necessarily want to go down this road of if there was a quid pro quo, then X, Y, and Z.
Right.
However, if you address that argument and it still doesn't matter if there was a quid pro quo, then there is no basis whatsoever for the impeachment.
Well, there's no basis to call John Bolton. So what brought all this up? You know, Ted was I'm a practical guy. Lisa Murkowski is an independent from Alaska.
Yeah.
We're Republicans from Texas and South Carolina, a little different politics.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. They could have called John Bolton and others, but they chose not to because they wanted to impeach the president before Christmas. The president would have declared executive privilege. It had gone to court like Nixon and Clinton did, but that got in the way of this railroad job. But the problem is there's a blurb in the New York Times, as they always do, saying John Bolton has direct evidence that the president asked him to condition the aid on investigating the Bidens, looking at interference by the Ukraine. That was different. The defense team of the president said there is no direct evidence, and they're right. There was no direct evidence in the record that the House chose to establish. And from just a common sense point of view, it raises a question. Lamar is an institutionalist. He wanted to make sure that the Senate was a body that was open-minded, fair, and Lisa had to go back home and explain, well, Why didn't you call any witnesses? And here's the point. If we call John Bolton now, won't the president raise executive privilege? Because if he doesn't, he forfeits that for future presidents. Do we as senators destroy the privilege? It'd be the first impeachment in history where there was no court access. We would have to decide executive privilege, and I think that made Lamar feel uncomfortable.
So walk me through that just a little bit more, because this is now not an argument.
So this is really important right here. So this is about what happens if we try to capture this testimony. The president was denied the chance to go to court in the House. They shut him out. What if we say now we want to call him for a new reason, and if he asked to go to court, the logic is the court of impeachment decides, not Article 3 courts. It may be the first time in history a president was impeached without ever being able to avail the courts.
Right.
So what's the answer to this? Assuming for a moment, arguendo, podcast people,
you know what arguendo means?
Go look up arguendo.
It was a little weak.
Okay, you showed off your Latin in the early episode. So arguendo
I am like,
is a lawyer word, and you put it in briefs all the time, where you say assume arguendo, which is I'm not admitting it, but assume for case of argument this is true. We still win. And so you do that in briefs all the time.
Yeah, that's right. In South Carolina, what if he said it? Is assuming arguendo. Right. Would it matter? So I assume for a moment, for arguendo, for the sake of argument, that if John Bolton did, if he was told by the president, I want to suspend aid until I find more about what the Bidens did, he had every reason in the world, because if you're in charge, Ted, if I put you in charge of fixing corruption in the Ukraine, and I find out that your son, who's a little too young.
I'm told that job pays $1 million a year.
Okay, so
that's pretty
don't
good.
You think
pays better than podcasting?
Don't you think when Joe Biden gets in front of the Ukrainian Parliament and says we got to end corruption in the Ukraine, particularly the energy sector, and everybody's saying, well, why is your son on the board of Burisma making $1 million? It kind of undercuts your argument. It destroyed our ability, quite frankly, to be credible agents of change, and that's a public policy. And you know what Lamar said? That's right. There's a reason to look at that. And there was all kind of evidence that the Ukraine didn't like Trump and like Clinton, at least parts of it. So the president had a legitimate public purpose, and that gets back to Dershowitz. He said, if there's a mixed motive, the reason this impeachment sucks so much, we got to get into Trump's brain and find out how much of it was personal and how much it was public. And what Ted and I said, they said there's not a scintilla of evidence that the Bidens did anything wrong. I said, no, there's not. There's a herd of scintillas. If you find one of these little suckers roaming around, you win. So even I could prove this doesn't pass the smell test. And they started thinking, and I said, assume for a moment that the conversation was most beneficial to the House managers. You wind up right where you are today. There was a legitimate public purpose to suspend the aid, and this is not an impeachable offense. Do you think the founders really meant to throw the president out of office, who could never run again, because for 40 days he suspended aid to the Ukraine? They wound up getting the money and they didn't investigate anybody.
But this is a real trick, a real political trick here, because you've got Senator Alexander, who you say cares about the institution.
Yes, he's a
worried
wonderful
about
man.
the credibility of the Senate. And you've got Senator Murkowski, who's independent. She's got to go back home to her state.
They had real problems.
So they have separate problems.
So Ted and I understood maybe differently than others, and I'll let Ted talk here. You've got to address the problem in front of you. From Lisa Murkowski's point of view, if we could show Lisa that if you had the New York Times article in front of you, and I tried to get a stipulation the day before, would it really matter? Wouldn't it still fall short of impeachment? Is this really what they meant to throw a president out, that you suspend aid when they got the money and never did an investigation, the big picture stuff? Then I think that turned the thinking that you really didn't need Bolton, because it wouldn't change the outcome.
Right.
So one of the things that I think was really potent is Lindsey's a trial lawyer. I'm an appellate lawyer. Those are different worlds. Those are different arenas.
I say shit show, and he says other stuff.
So that's the difference between a trial lawyer and an appellate lawyer.
Look, trial lawyers talk to juries. Appellate lawyers talk to judges. Those are different ways of framing things. But he and I teamed up very closely. We probably wrote a dozen questions together, some of which we asked, some of which we gave to our colleagues and they asked. But a lot of it, we were aiming over and over and over again.
We had a purpose.
At Lamar and Lisa, trying to move them, but trying to also give them, we've talked on this podcast a lot of times about framing the narrative and choosing the terrain on which you fight.
Right.
If the whole fight early on, the White House spent hours and hours saying there's no quid pro quo, there's no quid pro quo. Well, you know what? If that's their argument, the fact that the New York Times says John Bolton says there is a quid pro quo, that suddenly makes, if someone
problem.
is trying to be very even-handed, if that's the central dispute, it's really hard to say, well, gosh, shouldn't we bring him in to testify? What was important, and it took a couple of days to get us there, is to make clear it doesn't matter if there was a quid pro quo or not. That's not the issue.
So there were, I'm sorry to interrupt. There were these competing strategies. There were these two. Okay.
So here's the point. You got to know who you're talking to. Lisa Murkowski is very independent. She's not going to do something because somebody tells her to. Mm-hmm. It's inconvenient if you want a witness. That's not going to matter. It may hurt the team if you call a witness. And Lamar loves the institution. He's about to retire. He's going to do what he thinks best. And what we try to do is explain, play it out. They're playing a game here. They set us up. They could have called the witness. They chose not to because it's inconvenient. Now they're asking you to deal out Article III courts bad. So assume for a moment you had Bolton in front of you. Would it really change the outcome here? Does it make it an impeachable offense for Bolton to say what he's going to say? Right. And the answer is clearly no.
Now, there was another argument that I think moved them quite a bit.
Yes.
And it was that what the Democrats were trying to do, if we'd have been 50-50.
This is a big one here.
The Democrats were trying to go after the U.S. Supreme Court.
Because if it had been 50-50, and we talked about this on the show last time, it's completely unclear if there is a...
And they would have tried to make John Roberts decide, and whatever he did, it would have been viewed through a political lens. And so, look, one case that a number of us made is we're in a world where people have lost faith in Congress, they've lost faith in the presidency, and if we come through this and let the Democrats tarnish the Supreme Court too, where they lose faith in every institution of government, that's a real problem. And Michael, I think we've got a clip here that'll give an example of the Democrats' strategy.
The question from Senator Warren is for the House managers. At a time when large majorities of Americans have lost faith in government, does the fact that the Chief Justice is presiding over an impeachment trial in which Republican senators have thus far refused to allow witnesses or evidence contribute to the loss of legitimacy of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Constitution?
Now, that is an insulting question.
Now, Michael, I'm going to tell you something surprising.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren helped defeat the impeachment of the President of the United States.
How do you mean?
That little stunt she pulled was a campaign stunt. That was a fundraising stunt. That was designed to thrill the left-wing activists in the Iowa caucuses. There ain't nothing else going on than that. But I'll tell you what, that stunt helped deliver the votes of Lisa and Lamar.
It did.
Because it made clear this is a political game.
Right.
And if John Roberts doesn't vote the way Elizabeth Warren wants, she's going to call him a political hack and throw him into politics. And it suddenly raised the price of their voting and making it 50-50 because you don't want to see the court thrown into that political swamp. Do you agree with that, Lindsey?
100%. All you got to do is look at her statement. She said a fair trial in the Senate's impossible because of them.
This is Lisa Murkowski's statement.
So her statement was that they're going to set up the Chief Justice because they hate Trump so much. So the difference between 51 and 50 is enormous. If it's 50-50, then you put the Chief Justice in the crosshairs of history. You begin to corrupt the court, as Ted said. They could give a damn on the other side. They just want an outcome here. And I think it really mattered to Lamar and Lisa that Ted explained the historic nature of what the Chief Justice would be required to decide. And I think I explained, honest to God, if you believed every word of John Bolton, would it matter? And the truth is it wouldn't.
By the way, a left-wing attack group today put out an attack ad with John Roberts wearing a MAGA hat.
Yeah.
And that ticked off Republican senators. That helped produce the vote we had today.
So you think it was just an overreach by people like Senator Warren, by these left-wing groups? So what I want to know, I mean, this was a truly shocking day. What happens now?
Well, I just want to fill out with what you said. It wasn't just an overreach by them. They helped. It was two senators who are good people thinking it through. and Ted bringing to the table an expertise that very few people have, quite frankly. And I just tried to say, listen, I try to be fair. I supported the Mueller investigation. I actually co-sponsored legislation that would prevent Mueller from being fired without cause.
Yeah, what the heck were you thinking there?
Well, just to tell Trump, what the hell are you thinking?
I understand.
If you fire this guy, you're dead. Yeah. And I thought Mueller would be fair, but this whole process has not been fair. So I could say, listen, guys, it's not like I think the president's beyond being looked at. What they did in the House is dangerous to the country. It's a partisan impeachment, no due process, and we need to end it the right way. Do not make it worse. And what would make it worse is to do what Ted said, put the court in the crosshairs of history in the wrong way. And what would make it worse is to let them goad us into calling a witness that wouldn't matter because they think we're unfair. You've done nothing wrong here. It was the other side who did something wrong.
Well, and as a consequence, John Roberts is not in a position where he has to make any controversial rulings where he's being set up to be attacked as being political. He simply he presided over a fair trial, and it was the senators who voted. Mm-hmm. And look, we're elected to make policy decisions and political decisions, and also to apply the constitutional standard. And that's what we did.
In some way, it feels like we dodged a bullet. If it were a 50-50
Oh, you
vote.
have no idea. No, you dodged a
cannonball.
truck.
Wow.
Yeah, but because really, just play it out. We call witnesses, then you're not just going to call John Bolton. You're going to have the whistleblower. It's going to be a nightmare for the country. You have all kind of issues decided by the Senate, should be decided by the courts. And you would set a precedent that I think would make impeachment of every president in the future almost a certainty.
And it seemed actually in some of the arguments we heard during the trial that there was a threat there or an acknowledgement that if we continue down this path, we're going to impeach every president from now on.
Why not?
And that remains a real risk. We've opened the door to that.
So how do you stop that? If the House loses, and one of the reasons they lost is because they've gone crazy. Donald Trump's changed the Republican Party, but he's driven the Democratic Party completely nuts.
Right.
What would happen if President Trump gets reelected? That's exoneration.
Well, and let me underscore that because that's a very good point. I actually think Bill Clinton helped keep Barack Obama from getting impeached.
How so?
Now, why is that? Republicans impeached
Absolutely.
Bill Clinton. And actually, Lindsey was one of the managers.
That's right.
Don't try this at home.
Okay. And it backfired. It hurt Republicans. It got Bill Clinton reelected. It didn't work. And a lot of Republicans took that message. Hey, wait a second. Being seen, being too partisan, too aggressive, using impeachment, that's a problem. And so when it came to Obama, look, Obama, on the abuse of power theory that we've heard from the House managers, Obama abused his power in many respects. And yet all of us agreed we shouldn't be impeaching Obama. We should beat him at the ballot box, which we tried to do. But impeachment wasn't the right tool. If Republicans hadn't gotten burned so bad on the Clinton impeachment, there would have been some loud voices to impeach Obama. But as it was, people said, let's not go down that road. So if you want to stop partisan impeachments going forward, the best way, and Lindsey, you're right, I hadn't thought about it and connected it like this, the best way to stop it is for Democrats to get walloped in November, because then the next Democrats will say, okay, wow, this impeaching business. And by the way, the Republicans will too.
Well, we still remember. Okay, Lamar asked a question. What's the partisan difference between Nixon, Clinton, and Trump? A lot, a little, none. A lot of bipartisanship for Nixon.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing the founders had in mind.
Yep.
This is a constitutional death penalty for a politician. You should use it sparingly. Clinton had 33 Democrats say, let's look at it, bipartisan impeachment. And Clinton basically cheated Paula Jones out of her day in court, hid evidence, perjury, you name it. You can't have the most powerful person in the country destroy a private citizen's right to have their day in court. Now, here we are with Trump. Bipartisan rejection of the articles of impeachment.
Right.
And I think that bothered Lamar.
And it was
the way it was done and the outcome in the House,
actually,
we don't want to be part of that.
Both of us joined with Lamar on a question on exactly that.
Lamar really rose to the occasion here.
Because what you're saying is there was a bipartisan rejection of impeachment. But in terms of the people who actually voted for impeachment, it was the first time in U.S. history you had a purely partisan impeachment.
And I hope it's the last. Right. See, Clinton was in his second term. Nixon resigned. If Trump wins, He'll be the first person impeached in his first term to get reelected. That will exonerate him.
Now, I want to know, obviously, the impeachment hearings have been so dreary and tedious, and
You got to be kidding me.
I know you'll be shocked.
kind of life are you
having
living?
fun. I admitted
If you're
that to
watching this
Lindsey.
podcast, you're loving this stuff.
Well, the podcast maybe. C-SPAN, I don't know.
Although actually people listen to this because they can't watch C-SPAN for 13 hours and
That's
it makes
exactly
their eyes
right.
and ears bleed.
But
this way, at
this
least,
is somewhere between C-SPAN and the trial.
Was there any moment that had some levity to it, some foibles, some...
I think the funniest moment was last night, the very last of the questions,
Without a
16
doubt.
hours of questions. Amy Klobuchar submits the last question, sends the card down. Number one, she sends the wrong card down.
Yeah.
So the chief doesn't read it. She realizes she's screwed up. She has to run down and write her name on the card.
Yes.
So that starts off. We're
it's not
we're cracking
doing
up
well.
at that.
Yeah, and it's not that hard.
You literally write your name on it. Kindergarten.
They're not
first
tricking
day
you
of school.
here. Yeah.
Okay, we're
I did it
connect
3
the dots.
times and I didn't screw up. That
You
tells you how
put
easy
your
it is.
name on the top.
Yeah.
Block letters.
I think she was thinking about Iowa. Maybe
Okay.
she wasn't paying attention.
So Phil, this is a good one. Keep going.
So her question was, would the House managers give a closing argument? So Adam Schiff stands up. You see him kind of puff out his chest. He starts walking forward. And Jerry Nadler, who's sitting like 4 seats behind him, runs behind him, pushes Schiff out of the way, and goes to the microphone. And Schiff is literally going, Jerry! And he stands there behind
Literally.
Nadler. I mean, glaring.
Literally.
He wanted to punch or strangle him.
These are the 2 House Democrat impeachment managers.
They're the leads. And Nadler just went and gave his closing arguments. And Schiff stood there for a good 10 seconds. And then he just sat down and glared at Nadler the whole time. And by the way, Roberts, he had his reading glasses on the tip of his nose. And I've known John Roberts 25 years. You saw a slight smile, which for him is cracking up laughing.
that's it, yeah.
Because they almost had a fist
This
fight.
man has never smiled in his life. So
He's
so
actually wickedly funny.
no, he
I'll
is.
tell you.
I know John. You're right. He's a brilliant.
That is
man.
some
And
breaking
he is
news.
in
Nobody
his own
knows
way.
that.
Mitch McConnell's funny in his own way. So here's the deal. Jerry's wife is sick.
Lindsey's
Let's pray
funny.
for it.
Yeah.
She's
Yes.
got pancreatic cancer.
Yes.
And now I'm praying for Jerry. I've known him for a long time, but Jerry can throw a punch. He can take a punch. So number one, Schiff. If Jerry Nadler's out running you need to get in better shape. So, but the deal is, it was just shocking, and we were all pulling for Nadler to win the race.
We'd heard enough of Schiff.
So Schiff started good, but after about 30 hours of Schiff, you're ready to turn the channel. You know it's bad when people want to hear Nadler, not Schiff. So the bottom line here is the classic story, and I know we got to go because y'all got to do whatever you do in a podcast world. So,
Senator, is this your first
don't drink and
podcast?
drive. So here's the deal.
His flip phone
So
doesn't download him.
Chuck Schumer, trying to be clever, sometimes he is, sometimes we all fall short in this business. He invites, he gives his ticket to be a spectator at the trial to Parnas.
This is this corrupt Ukrainian
the
guy.
Crooked snake guy.
under indictment.
In the Ukraine,
He's got
he
a
said,
ankle
I'm in
bracelet.
on it. Lindsey Graham knew it all. And they said, have you ever talked to Lindsey Graham? No, but I heard he knew it all. So I don't know it all. So they invite him to come. He shows up to get his ticket. He can't get in because he's got an anklet bracelet from the court. You can't make this one up.
That is, I almost wish the
Schumer's
impeachment-
guest can't come into the trial because he's got an ankle bracelet.
That's par for the course.
Well, State of the Union, I heard Schumer's bringing Charles Manson.
That'd be good. That'd be interesting if the guy's dead. So anyway, I've never done this before. If you're number 2 in the podcast world, you need to up your game.
because this is number one.
Apparently we're number 1.
I know that. I'll take that as a compliment. Maybe.
number 2?
Speaking of, we've got to get you out of here because the senators are off. You get a couple days off now.
We're union. We're done by 9.
I'm headed to Texas.
Heading to Texas.
Yeah.
Senator Graham, you're done
I'm
as well.
going to South Carolina. One last story. The 2 guys that led the Alamo, both of them are from South Carolina. What does that mean? We'll go a long way for a lost cause. And I was an impeachment manager.
Texas heroes.
Would love Texas heroes. God bless Texas. But Henry Hyde was giving us the old, take the hill, boys. We're going to go over the Senate. We're going to stand for truth, justice, and the American way. You know, the brave men and women at the Alamo, you know, they stood their ground. And, you know, that's our charge. That's our charter. I said, hey, Henry, didn't they all get killed? And he says, that's something I ignored, but it's a good point. But he did say, we're still talking about him to this day.
That is true.
And a final point wrapping up, there will be another bombshell.
There will be another.
Between now and
Kavanaugh
Wednesday.
times two.
I
Do you think
promise you something else is coming between now
Yeah.
and the verdict on impeachment that will be voted on Wednesday. There'll be another bombshell in the New York Times probably, but something else is coming.
Because when I saw it today, I just thought, okay, it's over, right? I don't need to worry about it anymore. You're saying a lot.
They're not done.
We both were on Kavanaugh, and you asked what's next. After this is over, we're going to ask some hard questions to the State Department. Why didn't you understand this conflict of interest? Why didn't you do something about it? We're going to get to the bottom of the Pfizer warrant abuse. We're going to do all that stuff. But
by the way, this is breaking news.
Yeah, we cannot live in a country.
So because a lot of questions in the mailbag, people are asking, are we going to get to the bottom?
Trust me, not because I actually like Joe Biden. I've traveled the world with him. But, you know, if it had been Mike Pence or Vice President Cheney, they'd be all over. We can't live in a world where just one side gets looked at. I don't have any animosity in my heart toward anyone, but the truth of the matter is you got to have a country where the rules matter for everybody, not just President Trump. I mean, not for Democrats. President Trump, from the day he took office to now, has gone through hell. His family's gone through hell. And I promise you, to those who care, we're going to get to the bottom of Burisma, because it's important we find out about Burisma. We're going to find out, how could you issue a warrant 4 times against an American citizen? Here's the world. If Trump goes to a Russian restaurant to have dinner, he's a Russian.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, you can have $3 million paid to your son in the Ukraine and nobody cares.
Now, if President Trump gets acquitted, you're saying the Senate Republicans are not going to give up on this. What can be done to get to the bottom of
Jim Risch is chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. The first witness I want to call is John Kerry's chief of staff. When you were told that there was a conflict of interest by John Kerry's stepson, who was their business partner, why didn't you do something about it?
And last I checked, both you and I are on foreign relations.
Last time I checked, we're on judiciary and we're on foreign relations. This is the beginning of a day of reckoning.
This is not the beginning of the end, maybe the end of the beginning. We're moving on.
It's the end of the podcast, I hope.
And it's the end of the... one thing I want to know before we let you get out of here and hop onto a plane, one last thing is, I noticed it's much earlier tonight. Usually we're here at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's only 11 o'clock at night. Why is it that Mitch McConnell, that all these senators are letting people get out of here so early? Was there some...
I think the Democrats wanted to go to Iowa. Those 3 Democrats
jumping to go to Iowa.
Did you talk to any of your colleagues? Were they?
Well, you know, let's look at it this way. I'm not married, so why can't you get everything done the way you want it? I'll let Ted answer that question. We got 100 people in the Senate. Everybody has different agendas, but Sunday's Super Bowl, right? Monday is the Iowa caucus. Tuesday's the State of the Union. Bottom line is, this is the best Mitch could do, and I think Mitch McConnell did a brilliant job handling this. I really do.
Bets on the Super Bowl before we go?
Look, I'm rooting for the Chiefs just because they beat the Texans, and so on that principle, if they go on to win it all, I get to say the Texans are the second best in my reckoning.
Yeah, I'm pulling for the Falcons.
There we are. That's our show. That's the final verdict on the Super Bowl. We've got a whole lot more coming up.
I don't like my chances.
I'm Michael Knowles. On behalf of Senator Lindsey Graham, so gracious to spend the night in our bunker over here.
Yeah.
This is Verdict with Ted Cruz.
Senator, I'm so glad that everybody got to watch that podcast, listen to it. If you didn't get to watch it, you can on YouTube. If you're listening, this is an audio podcast right now. It is. You don't realize when you guys were taping that what a blessing it was going to be to have that video and those really fun moments. But also just to remember what a fighter he was and how you guys became good friends.
He had a profound impact. Without Lindsey Graham, I don't know that Brett Kavanaugh ever gets confirmed to the Supreme Court. I don't know that we get the reconciliation bill passed. I don't know that President Trump has anywhere near the number of successes he's had without Lindsey Graham. And so that podcast, you're right. When we were doing it, I didn't realize that there would come a time when he wasn't with us. To be honest, if we were going to have a guest for a second time on Verdict, Lindsey would have been right at the top of the list. And we're not going to have the chance to do that, but I will say I miss my friend, and thank you, Lindsey. Thank you for the legacy you left for America.